Shalom Aleichem and welcome. We are going to begin a series of classes or YouTube videos that will be dealing about to be a Jew. Basically, a lot of the classes that you'll be seeing up here will be hopefully to prepare you, the candidate, to go through the hoops and the process of knowledge of learning to be a Jew. Obviously, there are a lot of different things and different interpretations of what is required for a person to become a Jew, and of recent, of course, that has been a very hotly debated issue. Finally, Israel has made a curriculum out of this, and a lot of the rabbis that we know of have really made a lot of money in this whole entire process. Unfortunately, this wasn't the way it was before. But unfortunately, this is the reality. This is the reason why Ways of Israel, Los Caminos Israel, is offering these classes absolutely free via the YouTube, since we have this wonderful tool of education that we can make available to you at a very incredible price, which is free. Obviously, I'm not going to reject any donations that you send our way, because obviously our organization to definitely use it. However, I think it's very important that we set down the basis so that you, the person who's learning, want to learn and can grow and can study to prepare yourself for the conversion process. And one of the books that most organizations or beddins usually require as an intro is a book called To Be a Jew by Rabbi Donin. There are others also out there, like the one that was even before that one by MAURICE LAMM, Becoming a Jew. So there's a lot of materials out there, and even now blogs and websites, all to try to help those people who are trying to go through conversion. And let me say this, there's much more materials available in English than there is into Spanish, and that's why I have dedicated a lot of my time to the Spanish world, because there's such a lack of material in that area. And those who have written in such a way that it makes it almost impossible for the average reader or average student to understand and comprehend. So I'm going to try to do the best as I can, try to summarize it, and try to take you through it. But if you do have the book To Be a Jew, it's a very down-to-earth, basic, light way of understanding Judaism and to be a Jew. In the first three chapters, it covers the areas of underlying the basic creed of Judaism, if we could even say Judaism has a creed, the daily way of life, which is the second part of the book, and the third part is the special occasions in which we have during a year. And then finally, the fourth part, special occasions of life. Now we're going to be dealing with the next three videos, hopefully about the underlying creed, which is going to cover three chapters in particular. First of all, we're going to look at why, first of all, you want to be a Jew. There are joys and burdens of being Jewish. The formal response that the Bet Din makes on behalf of the Jewish community for Gentile, customarily enthusiastic request to be converted, is really an astonishment of belief, says MAURICE LAMM. You can't mean that. It could be a splash and emphasis of the sobering fact that being a Jew is not a joyride. It's often a painful experience. The hesitation doesn't meet the convert's expectation at the moment of decision. It surely is not a fan of the fire of his exuberance or enumerating the glories of the Jewishness and the strengthening of his resolve. Obviously, a lot of things is still to be desired by the welcoming mat, as it were, of the rabbinical leadership towards those who wish to become Jews. Tradition clearly describes the entire process of receiving a convert. Now we're talking a person not of a doubtful background, because we're dealing with a person that has no connection whatsoever with Judaism in the past, or even has some type of oral tradition that they are Jews, because there's a whole bunch of different other issues that comes into play with that. However, when we're talking about a convert, we're talking about a person who basically has no connection whatsoever to Judaism, has no connection whatsoever of some type of a descendant, be it male side or female side. We're talking about a person who basically is coming in purely because they're from a non-Jewish background, they're Gentile, and for the purpose they want to become a Jew. This is called a proselyte. And when a Gentile comes forth for the purpose of becoming a proselyte, or upon investigation with no ulterior motives is found, the court should say to him the following: why do you want to come and become a proselyte? In other words, a convert. Do you know that Israel at the present is sorely afflicted, oppressed and despised, and confounded by the beset suffering? If he or she answers, I know and I am indeed unworthy, he should be accepted immediately. And the commentator Rashi amplifies this, says, I'm not worthy enough to share your troubles, and would it were that I should reach that level. In other words, a person who comes to the realization that Judaism is the truth, it's only ulterior motives, not because they want to get married, not because they see money, that the Jews have money, or that the Jews can make money, or any of those ulterior motives, but after teaching them basic fundamentals of the faith and some major and minor laws, we inform them of this punishment for violating the commandments. How so? The court should say to him, know that before you came to the faith, or to the religion, if you ate prohibited animal fat, your punishment was not excision, as were being cut off from the people. If you violated the Sabbath, your punishment was not stoning. But now, after you convert, if you eat prohibited fat, you are liable to be excised, disconnected from the people. If you violate the Sabbath, you are liable to be stoned. These are some real serious consequences in being a Jew. In other words, this is not a feel-it type of conversion. I feel the power. No, this is something real that you have to do and have to really analyze if you want to become a Jew. Telling someone who, in good faith, wants to embrace Judaism that he is liable to the death penalty, although it hasn't been practiced for thousands of years, does not sound like a nice Jewish welcome wagon. But the statement of the rabbis is meant to be straightforward and not oriented to attract converts. It's also not designated solely to discourage or forestall them, push them away. In other words, it's a serious confrontation to understand the realities and responsibilities that a Jew does have. Maimonides, the Rambam, adds, and we do not magnify the mention of punishment, nor do we detail them even the punishment just recited. In other words, specifically telling him, this is going to happen, this is going to happen, because they might cause him to hesitate or turn away from the good path to the bad path. Oh my gosh, how many rabbis have done this in the process of trying to be more machmir in bringing in converts? There are so many who've done just the opposite of what the Rambam says, that actually has discouraged the person to such a way that they become more wicked than they were when they were coming to approach something godly. But it was also not a sell itself short type of program either. It warmly welcomes all sincere converts, so it must reassure them and soon after discourage them that being a Jew has huge benefits as well, not only consequences. Therefore, a bad list of the agonies must be balanced by a good list of the joys. A roster of the benefits equal to all the roll calls of risk. For this reason, immediately, after listening to the trouble, after listening to the presentation of the rabbis in the Bet Din, Judaism counts the blessing that accrues to a Gentile who accepts Judaism in the following way. And just as we teach him the liabilities of the commandments, so we teach him the rewards of the commandments. And we teach him that the observance of these commandments, he will merit the life of the world to come, and there is no completely righteous person but the wise one who performs these commandments and knows them. And we explain to him, know that in a place in the world to come is kept for the righteous. And they that are right are Jews. But that which you see, the Jews suffer in this world, is in fact a good thing. Everything is for good, hidden away for them because you can't gather much good in this world. At this point, the prosperous convert is faced with the alternative, both of which he's substantially the same result to the world to come, or he or she can opt for remaining a righteous non-Jew and receive and become an observant Jew and receive it also. Which will the convert choose? It becomes an issue in essence of where the convert or the individual decides to go. In essence, the response to the convert articulates the wisdom of the ancient Talmudic advice, offered in another context. Bring them close with your right hand and keep them distant with your left. The statements are placed at the very outset of the process and formally delivered by the community's representative, the Bet Din, as the rabbis, the leaders, and the Bet Din, with special intentions of informing the candidate the balanced truth. Some of the woes and some of the joys, but about the state of Jews in their religion. It would require an entire complete history and philosophy of Jews to do justice to a listing of the delights and disappointments of Jewish living. It is not our intention to provide such an exhaustive description, but following the styles of the sages to touch upon the subject lightly so that the reader may become acquainted with them, but not be overwhelmed by its topics. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam she'akol niyeh bivaro. Is it really worth being a Jew? There's so much of a burden being a Jew. Some of the roads are unfortunately obvious. The Jews are a permanent minority of a global society. With over 5 billion on the earth and only 13 million Jews sprinkled thinly over the world spinning the globe, says MAURICE LAMM. It sounds kind of coarse, kind of hard, but we are still, at this moment, the minority, although there is a promise that we will be even more numerous than even those that were in the land of Canaan, the land of Jericho, when Joshua went to go conquer them, because they see themselves as grasshoppers. And yet Hashem, God, promised us to be so numerous as the stars in the heavens, so countless as the sand of the seas, the sand particles the sand on the earth. Is it well worth it? Well, first of all, we need to put up with some difficulties. If it's a spiritual salvation that converts are seeking, he now knows that the righteous Gentiles shares with the observant Jew the same reward in that future world to come. So if it's about Helek HaOlam Haba, if it's about trying to get a portion in the world to come, you can do so being a non-Jew. However, there's more to it than just that. There is no religious requirements for a Gentile to be saved, quote unquote, and obligation to become Jewish. You don't have to become Jewish to be saved. You can be who you are, where you are, and develop a relationship directly with God, keeping some basic commandments as known as the 7 universal laws, and you have a share in the world to come, as long as you do it because MOSHE Rabbeinu, Moses our teacher, taught it and showed it. Second, it's an effective way of selling the religion. Surely it is not for this. Judaism is to be sold, according to some. But that is not at all the purpose of the conversion. The Bet Din response to the convert is designed to be an authentic, unadorned description of the condition of the Jewish people as it exists today. As it's prevailed in most of the Jewish history, nothing more, nothing less. It is meant to convey a truth that admits of no romancing, no glorification, no pretty words designed to attract people to the faith, and no pugnacious, xenophobic attempt to stave off newcomers with tales of horrors. Fortunately, in today's world of conversion business, the rabbis have filled the airwaves with the horrors of becoming a Jew, and not the love of God, which unfortunately has driven people away instead of driving them to the faith of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And let me say this to my friends who are of other faith: this faith of Judaism, which really should be called Mosesism, because in fact it's based on the precepts of Moses our teacher in the giving over of the law, because in fact that's when the Jewish people became a nation. When Israel became a nation, it started all from Moses. We call ourselves, as we get into this, we can look at the people called Israel and how it started not with Moses, but many, many, many years before that. Way before that, before there was any Jews, there were descendants of Noah. There was descendants of Avraham Avinu, and they were all believers in the one God. But there were some distinctions. As a matter of fact, as we get into the first chapter of To Be a Jew, it goes into the terms Hebrew, Evri, and Israelite, Israeli, and Jews have historically been using these words interchangeably. The Bible refers to Abraham as Evri, probably because he was migrated from the other side, from the Euphrates River. And the word Ivri means from the other side. It would be the equivalent. Those of you who know Mexico in the border, there is a river that crosses over, and during rain season that river gets filled, and a lot of the people that come from Mexico to the United States, they cross over, and they're usually called those who cross over, or in a very derogatory form, they would call them wetback. In a very similar sense, Abraham was the first quote-unquote wetback to be considered a wetback. And in that sense, I don't mean that to be negative at all, just that it was a term that those on the other side began to apply to him, meaning those from the other side. So here we have a term that's expressed to Avraham, who was in fact, that came from the land of Haran, of Ur-Chaldea. And he comes and crosses over the rivers, the Tigris rivers, and he's called the guy that came from the other side. And his children became known as Hebrews, those from the other side. His 12 sons and his descendants became known as the children of Israel through Jacob. And the Israelites, or the nation or people, became a people at Sinai. The word Jew is derived from one of the children of Yaakov named Yehuda, or Judah, the son of Israel, the most prominent of the 12 tribes, and the one that basically became the law giver, the law teacher, the law presenter, the law establisher. And that law was the law of Moses. And thus it became popular, the expression Jew. This became prevalent, namely in the entire people, when the Judeans from the kingdom of Judea, the kingdom of Judea survived the downfall of the northern kingdom of Israel in the year 722 before the Common Era, when the 10 tribes were led into captivity. Today the people are called Jewish, and their faith is called Judaism, and their language Hebrew, and the land of Israel is called Israel in name of our patriarch. The people of Israel started living a life as one family, tracing its antecedents back to Abraham. Literally, if you will look at it, the faith of Abraham encumbers more than one just family. Not only the family of Yaakov, it also covers the family of Esau. It also covers the family of Ishmael. And here thus we have the three monotheistic faith centered into the concept and connected to Avraham, our father. So Avraham becomes the father of the children of Israel. He also is the father of the children of Ishmael. He's also considered, in that sense, related to the sense of Ishmael, to the Muslim people. He's also connected to the children of Esau, who happens to be Edom, who's also known in the literature as the Christian people. And so now we have a very interesting situation, and where we have the children of Abraham covering not one group, but 3 different groups, all of which is present and prevalent in today's world. Now, why is that not taught? Don't have an idea. I just know that basically this is what Avraham represents to all 3 faiths. This is exactly what we're referring to. Now, only one of those 3 were given a promise to be able to inherit the lands and the promises that God gave specifically to Avraham. And there we have a little bit of differences in, you might say, in each of one of those faiths. On the basis of the origin, Jews everywhere regarded themselves as members of the family, an expanded family to be sure, and often far-flung, far-distant families, but families nevertheless. Membership in the family deserves and derives from the mother. Not like, for example, in Islam, which it derives by the father, and like in other faiths also from the father. In Christianity, normally you're known to be a Christian by the mother. If your mother's a Christian, you're a Christian, very similar to the Jews. If your mother is a Jew, you're a Jew. If your father is a Jew, but your mother is not, you are the stock of Israel, but not technically speaking a Jew. So you would have to go through a conversion. The child of any Jewish woman is considered to be a member of the family. But the membership in the family has never been by birth. It was not always limited by birth. It's always been open to all, and all of those who share the faith of this family may be adopted into it. And as any adoption, you have 2 parties that take a look at the child. The child itself, to see who wants to be part of that family, and those who will adopt the child as part of the membership of the family. Thus, a convert to Judaism not only becomes a partner in faith with the children of Israel, but through faith, the proselyte himself becomes one of the children of Israel, sharing fully in its heritage and privilege, and assuming all of its burdens, all of its tribulation. In other words, if I live like a Jew, if I practice Judaism, and I behave like a Jew in all respects, and I believe exactly like a Jew expects, then I can be a Christian, right? No. In other words, if he walks like a duck, quacks like a duck, acts like a duck, and behaves like a duck, he's a duck. Same way, he begins to adopt all of that life that the Jewish people has adopted. Now, the Jewish people is not a monolithic group of people. We have diversity within its whole entire family. And this is why it's very important to understand this diversity is very important to the life of the Jewish people, the nation of Israel. Once we make Judaism a monolithic faith, what's going to happen is going to be stuck, and it's going to start decomposing. Because in order for something to be live, there has to be a constant movement. Now, like any natural tendency for any family to be exclusive, to look inward, the particular family was never exclusive. In defense, Ben Jerry looked outward and reached out to the world at large. When the sanctuary was built in Jerusalem, the Jews saw it as a house of prayer, a bet tefillah, for all people, as it says in Yeshayahu, Isaiah 56, verse 7, and also in 1 Kings chapter 8, verse 41 through 43. It's interesting that in the prophet Hosea, it's very clear that this was not only to be only to a select group or select DNA or genes, because clearly Hosea had looked at the fact that he would call upon a people who were no people. And I will show mercy upon who I will show mercy to, and will obtain mercy. And I will say to them that they are a people, and that I will say to them that we're not a people, you are my people. And they will say to me, thou art my God, says in Hosea chapter 2, verse 22. And it's very sad to say, but the Jewish people, although my wine is bitter, but it is my wine. Nevertheless, we learn the Talmud in Talmud Pesachim 87b. The Rabbi Eliezer said that the Holy One only dispersed the Jewish people among the nations so that converts would join them. My friend, we want to get rid of exile. We need to be able to understand this function of bringing in all of the Jews back to the fold, all of those who want to be part of the people of Israel. This is a twofold thing that we're talking about. Number one, talking about those people who want to become, by choice, a Jew. And number two, those people who've been lost from their Jewish connection. They've been cut off because their forefathers did things to disenfranchise them, or distance them, or assimilated to such an extent that they were lost among the nations, and yet there's an urge, a spark, a sharp, whatever you want to call it, that calls you to come and be part of that people because you have some type of, I'm going to use it this way, DNA, blood calling, as it were. You too are to come back into the fold. And this is something that's very, very, very unique, and this is why those Jews that are in exile practicing becomes, as it were, a light to the lost, a light to those who wish to come and go under the presence of the divine shelter, divine wings. In the very moment we begin to kick people out, push people away in such a nasty way, we begin to turn people into Bnei Amalek. Let me say it again. Children of Amalek, who was refused, who was cast away, who was despised, and later came to harm the Jewish people later, as a fact that we read even in Bereshit, of what happened when Abraham caused this to happen. One of the children of Timnah. Everything we do, the way we bring people in, is so important to the Jewish people and making sure that they become part and parcel of the harmony of Kalal Israel and not create disharmony. Disharmony happens as a result of discrimination and against those who are coming in, because they are looked upon even after conversion with as a stain upon themselves, that they're not true Jews. They are like less than Jews. And we need to understand that we need to move away from this type of concept and embrace every single person that has chosen to become part of the Jewish people and not reject them. Just the opposite. They're not allowed even to remind them of their past. And yet, oftentimes I get emails from people who have already converted that are reminded of their past, reminded that they are a convert. It's a big problem. Although a small people, separate and distinct, Israel has nevertheless been a withdrawn people. a people unique. As I wrote on a Facebook page, I said very clearly, there is a distinction between Israel and the rest of the nations. That distinction is not that they have necessarily, they're more superior than the rest of other people. Not that necessarily that because they have a better blood type or because they have Neshamot Elokut and the rest of the non-Jews do not, which is a concept that I do not accept, but yet a lot of Hasidim, if you encounter them, will look and you'll ask them sincerely if they answer it to you. They do not look at the person who's non-Jew, a Gentile, in the same way that the Torah looks at them. And what I say by the Torah says very clearly when Hashem created Adam Rishon, the first man, he created him with Etzelem Elokim, in the image of God. In God's image did he create man. That means all mankind that came out of Adam has that same spark, has that same soul, has that same God in them, that extra soul in them. The only problem is that during history, we read that there was a time, a very dark period of time in history, that basically it was taught the idea of evolution, and that the nations of the world began to look at the Jew as the biggest demon, the diabolical people, deformed, hated, long-nosed, all deformed, like the wretched people of the world, to such an extent that they gave the Jews of Europe a black coat to wear, and they said, this will be your uniform. They used to wear lively coats, lively color. As it says in the Talmud, that a chacham, a sage, should wear lively colors. And yet they adopted this black dress, this black hat, this black coat, in order to identify themselves as the most direct, the most worst levels of society and humanity. So they accepted what basically the non-Jews, the nations, told them they were. Basically they accepted it with pride. And that became their new uniform. The black hat, the black kapata, the black streimels. This is where the roots of all these things began. Interesting enough, there was something else that was changed. They changed the idea that basically every human being has God in them, has that spark. And it changed it in such a way that they began to teach that basically only the Jews has a divine spark. Only the Jews. And that anybody who has any similarity of what we have, they must have a Jewish soul. And thus, we have, voila, a whole bunch of people who now have Jewish souls, miraculously. My friends, it's not that they have a Jewish soul. It's that they have God in them, and they have basically come out of the shedding of that darkness in their soul, but they have always had that God in them, that God spark in them, that God soul in them. They're just coming to realization that they are now coming close to the light, and they want to now be part of the people of Israel because they now identify with the light. This is a different perception altogether. So when you hear sometimes the derogative terms, and I hear it constantly, but it's a negative, very derogatory. Goy, oh yes, he's a goy, he's a goy, he's a goy. And the way they express it, like they cannot go beyond who they are. I don't hold to that. And many Orthodox Jews don't hold to that notion either. But it has to be publicized because there's that prejudice and there's that discrimination and that racism that's imbibed within the certain elements of Judaism today. And if we don't discard those concepts out of our existence, we may be facing something even worse than what happened in World War II, God forbid. Chas v'shalom. We need to understand that God created every human being in His image. You, my friend, has God in you. And you've dirtied it up. And it's time to clean up that soul so you can connect with God either through the Noahide covenant or either through becoming a Jew. But you have to clean it up. And this is what we're talking about. This is what the Torah does. This is what the Word of Hashem does. It cleans It cleans the soul of a person. It purifies you. It changes you, transforms you. It makes you literally into a new person. This is exactly what it means when a Jew becomes when a person goes through conversion. He becomes, here's a very loaded word here, he becomes born again in the Jewish sense. Now there is a Jewish trap. And there is some major commitments. The devout Jew looks upon something more as a fulfillment of divine prophecy. Through you and your descendants will all the families of the earth be blessed. As a vindication of Israel's covenant, that's an agreement that God made with Abraham, with Abraham's child Isaac, with Abraham's child, the child of Isaac, Yaakov, and with Yaakov's children, the 12 tribes of Israel, and their descendants. Through you and your descendants will all families of the earth be blessed. Genesis 28:14. And as a vindication of Israel's covenant with God, for you are a holy people unto the Lord your God. And you did God choose to be unto him a treasured people from among all the peoples of the face of the earth. Notice this, a treasured, a special, set apart people. Deuteronomy chapter 14 verse 2. The devout Jews accept this status with humility, not arrogance, and thanksgiving, not in negativity, seeing it is as a yoke and a burden as well as a distinction. He sees himself as a servant of the Lord, ready to do his bidding at all times. Serving the Lord takes many forms: spending one's life studying Torah, studying the law, being faithfully observing the rituals and in its ethical commandments, struggling for justice and righteousness in society when that is absent, or even when it is present but not shining. The learned and the observant Jew ignores none of these ways. Whatever the believing Jew may find himself doing in fulfillment of that role, and whatever apparent smallness or insignificance his existence may appear to have, for him there is a cosmic significance. And the purpose in so doing is the bidding of the Lord. The skeptical Jew, the agnostic Jew, on the other hand, who does not at all see himself as a servant of the Lord, is embarrassed by any reference to Israel's enjoyment of divine favor, or any notion of a special national mission. Let me say it again, special national mission. Have you ever asked yourself, even those who are watching, what is Israel's mission? Well, we know Israel's mission is to be a light unto the nations. It says it very clearly by the words of the prophet. And why? Because we are lights. And we are to lighten every area of our existence, even our four corners. And unfortunately, a lot of our four corners is not that filled with light. Becoming merely another national entity just would not suffice. Just becoming another nation among other nations is not good enough. We believe that the nation and peoples of the world have their divine purpose and their assigned roles to fulfill. For God is the God of all the world, not only the Jewish world. Not just Jewry. We see our assignment as something involving a unique role in history, a unique role on an individual level. It implies a special purpose in life, a reason for existence. The purpose is not to make Jews of all the world, but to bring people of the world, at whatever their distinctive beliefs may be, to an acknowledgement of the sovereignty, the oneness of God, and the acceptance of the basic values thereby revealed in those commandments that God has given us, the Jewish people, be it for the nations of the world through the 7 universal laws, or throughout the connecting of the 613 commandments that's given to the Jewish people. It serves as a means by which blessings will be brought to all of the families of the earth. That's what it says in Genesis 12, verse 3. It's this mission that underlies the Jews of the coming day when the world shall be perfected under the reign and the rule of the Almighty, and all mankind will call upon the name of Hashem, the name of the Lord, and all will recognize not multiple gods, not multiple religions, but one God. It is only in these terms of supernatural, though they be, that any plausible explanation that is offered of Israel's ability to survive against many obstacles and threats to its very existence and its success in penetrating the thoughts of most nations. It is in these terms that we discover the meaning of Israel's historical meaning and dispersion, as well as its achievements and strength in its restoration to Zion. Interesting enough, I was talking today with someone about the Golden Age of Spain. I've got a book here written by Rabinowitz of Jewish history that doesn't speak very well about the Golden Age of Spain. I'll be more than happy to show you. Of course, it's not a Sephardic point of view. It doesn't. There's very little to bring to light the fact that during the Golden Age of Spain there was a unity and there was great knowledge of Torah. And I didn't just say philosophy. I didn't just say non-Torah understanding or knowledge. It was an amount of Torah knowledge that compared to the rest of the world, it left the rest of the world to shame. And there was a couple of things that we need to be aware of that Golden Age of Spain. You had both Jews, Christians, and Muslims all speaking together, not killing each other, not trying to control each other, not trying to destroy each other, not trying to harm each other. But you had open dialogue and conversations in which the communities there was understanding and respecting each other in their faith towards the one God. Oh, I would wish that that epoch would again occur. Of course it's going to, but it's going to be a much higher level. And that is when we all leave our nonsense and began to focus on what is really important. One God. It's one world, my friend. And it's one true faith in that one God that we're talking about. That's why if you see the logos of the Ways of Israel, if you see it from the beginning of this video, you can notice that there's a lot of path. But all of that path leads to one Torah. And it's that one Torah that's multiple faceted. It's not only for one group of people. It's multiple faceted, over 70 faces of the Torah. That means the Torah can reach humanity no matter from what direction they're coming from. Now, we have a particular land. And this bond between the Jewish people and the land becomes known as Eretz Israel, the land of Israel. It's Eretz HaKodesh, the Holy Land. The land began at the time of Avraham. So we have to understand that here we become a big struggle, because when we talk about Avraham, we need to understand about Avraham and his children. It wasn't only Isaac or Ishmael or Esau or Yaakov. We need to come to the recognition that only one of these children have the rights to be you might say the torchbearer, the rightful bearer of the land, the keys of the land, as it were. And I want to ask you this because it's very important. Who does he refer to when I ask this question? That it says and stated the offspring. Now I want you to read with me the passage. It's found in Genesis chapter 17, verse 7 through 18. I will maintain my covenant between me, means God, and you, that's Abraham, and your offsprings to come as an everlasting covenant through the ages, to be God to you, and be God and to your offsprings to come. Obviously, Abraham had many offsprings. I give the land to you to sojourn in it, to you and your offsprings to come, all the land of Canaan, as an everlasting possession. Now, Canaan was the land of the Canaanites, Canaan, one of the descendants of Ham. And we find out that basically, as we read from the beginning of Genesis, that basically everything that he owned became possession of one who would be his master. Now, thus became Israel born to what was then 3,800 years in the land of Canaan. It was to become the land of Israel. The long sword journey of the children of Israel in Egypt, they were enslaved and oppressed, was followed by their mass exodus and return to the land that had been promised them. In the final prophecy to Moses, just before his death, we read again, and the Lord said to him, this is the land which I swore to Abraham, Isaac, and Yaakov. I will give it to your offsprings. Deuteronomy 34, verse 4. Who's missing? We're missing some other descendants of Abraham. Now, the ones that we're missing is Ishmael, which was also a descendant of Abraham through Agar, and we're also missing Esau. Why does the Torah not mention Esau and only mentions Jacob? Why does the Torah only mention Isaac and does not mention Ishmael? We know that Ishmael and Isaac were at the tomb of their father Abraham when he was buried. And Ishmael gave the preference to the rights to Isaac, thus showing that he was the rightful heir. But we have a problem. According to the Quran, it says very clearly that there was a mistake. According to the Quran, it says that Ishmael was the one that was the inheritor. There was Ishmael that was on the Akedah. That it was Ishmael who was the inheritor. Later on comes Esau, and Esau says, no, we are the spiritual inheritors of our father. And thus we have now a big strife between the two. Both Esau, Edom, the descendants, who are Christians, are now struggling for the spiritual heritage and rights of the land which belong to Isaac and Jacob. We have Ishmael, who is also now fighting for the land and for the place in history to be the spiritual and physical reemplacement of Isaac. A good friend of mine who lives in Pakistan, whose name will not be mentioned because of the sensitivity of where he lives, said to me, Moshe, I want you to look at the Quran. I think it was like Surah 92. It says, if there was ever any doubt about the literatures of the Quran, that they are to look to the other literatures before, which means the Christian literature, which was before Islam, and the Jewish literature, and to rely on reading that book because it will find out that you will find the truth. Well, this gentleman, of course, had his doubt, and he looked and he discovered that the Torah is true. Now that seems kind of chutzpahdik. I feel like you have some real, some real galls to say that it's Ishmael who has the right to this. According to our tradition, yes. Christianity came after Judaism, and so did Islam. So even in the process of chronology, we have an issue there. What was prior to has much more weight than what was added to afterwards, or changed, or tried to be given a different story. That's one look at it. But there was a particular thing. The Jewish people was to receive this land, but not just any way. It was to receive this land with the condition that they would live up to its standards of being holy. And whenever the land was being filled by pagan practices or by idolatrous practices or practices that caused it to throw out or throw up the inhabitants, even if it were us, the Jewish people, it would kick us out. And thus we have a very clear command as a people we are called upon to become a holy people. And the land is a holy land, and it was not to be defiled by pagan practices that were present and prevalent in the land as it is in the world at large. These pagan rites, to'evas or abominations and idolatries, the Israelites were bidden to purge from the soil, clean the land, clean it all out. No idolatry and no abomination. This is why the rabbis did such a big thing in the recent gay parade march in Israel, because the Torah tells us that one of the things that the nations that was before the Jewish people there used to practice was basically homosexuality. And thus one of the things that's called to'eva in our Torah is homosexuality. But my friend, that's not the only thing that's called to'eva. There are many other things that is called to'eva. So I'm not picking just on this particular thing called homosexuality. That has been with us way before even the Jewish faith. But it has been said something that the Jewish faith stated very clearly and precisely, that it is considered by us to'eva, abomination. And it will cause people to be thrown out of the land. My friend, look what is happening. Look at my videotape that I put together about the abomination of the declaration of legalizing homosexual marriages in this country. Not long after that I put that video together, we have begun seeing you might say, the inception, the beginnings of the downfall of this great country that I belong to. I mean, just turn on the news. There's no doubt that we are in great danger. But is there anybody out there listening? Is there anyone wanting to do something to stop the madness? No. Let us be merry. Let's live and die. Let's live and play, because tomorrow we die. That's the mentality. And you have leaders in our Jewish people, among the Jewish people, that are afraid to talk about this. Either because they don't see it such a big problem, or either because they're afraid to speak and be completely disenfranchised by their members who pays for their underwriting of their shuls. Either way you look at it, we are in some serious business here. When the Jews dreamed of one day returning to the land and reestablishing their independence and restoring the national existence, they dreamed of it and prayed for it. And never a day did they have absence the Holy Land out of their thoughts. I have an incredible book here called Eim Habanim Samecha, that was written by a person who died in the Holocaust, and how he was fighting. The majority were Hasidic rabbis who were refusing to recognize the land of Israel as a potential new state of the Jews to survive. And in a prophetic way, he talks about how it's possible that out of the secular would blossom a state where Jews could come and reside. But unfortunately, everything that he spoke about also came into fruition. The battles, the secularity, and the religious corruption that took place as a result of this. I mean, really, you should read this book. It's a fascinating book. If you wanted the name of the book, I'll be more than happy to send you the name of the title so you could buy it, because it's fascinating. It's very, very, it's a very thick book, about 400 pages, but it will be well your reading. They dreamed of the land of Israel that one day they would be able to live in. During the centuries, the land was overrun by a series of invading, conquering forces: Romans, the Byzantines, the Arabs, the European Crusaders, Turks, and finally the British forces during World War I. What can we say about World War II that led up with the German invasion and the massacres of millions and millions of Jews? The early settlers found a land that had been neglected through their century, abounding in malaria, swamps, and disease. It was a barren land of rock, sand, and desert. And the few Jews in the communities were concentrated in the cities of Jerusalem, Hebron, Tiberias, Safed. While not all the Jews were involved in organized struggle to achieve their aims, every devout, believing Jew was faith in Zionists, since the aspiration of the return to Zion is built into every very fabric of the traditional Jewish faith. And let me say this about Zionist. There's such a misunderstanding of the word Zion, Zionist. You have the political Zionists, but you had a spiritual Zionist that we wanted to see the land of Israel blossom according to Torah values and Torah law, and having a Torah leader, a Torah king that would rule over the land of Israel. And by this, many still hold to that hope and that dream that one day have our temple rebuilt. This is part of the whole entire aspiration and inspiration of the Jewish people. And thus, lo and behold, God says, nope, I'm going to allow it to be a secular state. Completely secular and divorced from any Jewish tradition whatsoever. And if you see it today, it's like emerging a mixture of secularity and religiosity, which at many times becomes at the throat of each other, ready to destroy each other. The Ramak does talk about that eventually this current system, that it has to be brought down or either transformed into the one that is expected. So I'm not very, very convinced on either the extreme Hasidic world that Israel should be completely underrooted and brought down, as many groups mentioned. And I'm not also so strong on the other point of view that Zionist is the only way to go. Take more of a middle of the road. If those of you who have seen my videos in Spanish knows. I think there is still a lot to be achieved in the current process. Israel is restored brings about a whole plethora of different questions regarding the issues of the Mashiach. Because after all, according to most theology in Judaism, those people who study the idea of the process of thought of God in relationship to the land and in relationship to the Messiah, they believe that Israel must be restored before the Messiah comes. There are those who believe that Messiah will restore the kingdom, the nation. So now you have an incredible position here, because those who were present in the recovery, the unplanned recovery during the 6-day war of the old eastern portion of Jerusalem, containing the site where the Temple Mount is, and the sacred western wall, the Kotel, in the old Jewish quarters and its historic remnant, all of which was captured by Jordan since 1948 and been brought into an emotional outpouring that was recaptured by the Jews in the 6-day war. This became a turning point for the nation and state of Israel that we know it. Imagine all of the ordeals that Israel, its people, suffered and had to go through to arrive at this point. But the question still remains, did Mashiach bring about Israel's present restoration? The word Mashiach derives from the word Messiah, which means anointed. The Messiah in Jewish thought was never conceived as a divine being like in other thoughts. It was never perceived as the incarnation of the Ein Sof. I'm saying this on purpose because those of you who've seen my posting on Facebook will understand that even the Nazarims now hold to the idea of the Hasidim, or Chabad in particular, that the Messiah is in fact one with Ein Sof. Ein Sof is the infinite, is God. Thus making Chabad in particular this interpretation of Chabad, of the Baal HaTanya, and that of Christianity, one and same essence. Those who never studied Christianity cannot tell me that that's not the case. And that's why I can argue it. The fact that both groups have come to a collusion of thought is an incredible happening never seen in the parallels of Jewish history, except during the time of Shabbatai Tzvi. But it's interesting to note that our rabbis did see that coming when they make mention of that in the Tractate Sanhedrin regarding the issue of the body, the heresy coming to the point where it flow like a minute until the whole body is filled with leprosy. And then the same way the whole world will be filled with the teachings of the Ma'amim Netzarim, which we are seeing it today. I can't be part of that. I know what's going on. I would see it. This is why there's such an attractment. So many people are attracted to these ideologies and philosophies because they're one and the same. And yet, at the same time, we're seeing something so unique that people are flowing back and connecting to the land of Israel. And the state of exile is slowly but surely disappearing. The return to the land of Israel was not only a nationalistic sentiment harbored by the Jewish people even in the first century, as you saw many messianic movements arise to try to make it happen, as you see today, but a deeply religious sentiment providing the opportunity for a fuller relationship to God than was ever possible, and thus really paving the way for the real Messiah, not any of the previous ones that have claimed to be it or they claimed him to be it. The Amidah, the central prayer recited 3 times a day, includes the prayer of the realizations of this dream. Major portions of our heritage Our fathers, a desirable, good, ample land. Prayers pleading for the rebuilding of Yerushalayim, the holy city. The fast of Tisha B'Av, as well as the minor fast of the year, mourns for the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem, and so do our prayers for the supplication which we follow in our daily morning prayers and noon service. At weddings, just like the one you perhaps seen on video, a glass is broken to symbolize the tragedy and sometimes the bereavement similar of symbolic reminders that takes place. May my right hand forget thee, and my strength leave me if I forget thee, O Jerusalem. The very formula used to comfort a bereaved family never lets us forget all of Jewry is in constant mourning for the loss of Jerusalem. May the Lord comfort you, goes the prayer, together with all who mourns for Zion and Jerusalem. And on Seder plate of the Passover Seder, as well as the service of Day of Atonement, concludes with the cry, next year in Jerusalem, Lashana haba beYerushalayim, Lashana haba beYerushalayim. The Sabbath and the Holy Prayers are all constant reminders of Zion and Jerusalem. The prayers for rain, for dew, observance, Tisha B'Shevat, the New Year's for trees, they are all tied with the land. The historic Jewish Messianic vision is also expressed by Isaiah in the prophecy in terms of Zion and Jerusalem, namely, out of Zion shall go forth the Torah and the word of God from Yerushalayim. To eliminate such aspiration would be tantamount to emasculating the religious faith of Israel. In other words, the land without its people is not a land and it's not a people. The passage from the book of Psalms sums the religious historic attitude towards Jerusalem, the historical capital, the national capital, the universal capital of the Jewish people. It's all symbolized. If I forget thee, O Jerusalem, let my right hand forget her cunning, let my tongue cleave to the roof of my mouth. If I remember thee not, if I set not Jerusalem above my chiefest joy. Psalms 137, verse 5 through 6. And again, the Hebrew Bible, who is at all familiar with the prophets and its teachings in its history of Israel, should emotionally overwhelm you by both the restoration of the Jewish state and the return of Jerusalem to its central position, not only within that state, but within the world. It is no wonder that totally unexpected and unplanned recovery during the Six-Day War. We recovered in 1967 the oldest eastern portion of Jerusalem, containing the site of the Temple Mount and the sacred Wailing Wall, the Kotel, in the old Jewish quarter with its historic remnants. And since then, it was only held by Jordan since up to 1948, should have brought us to emotional outpouring that it did part of young and old. To this very day, Israel is alive. Its nation and its people, it is alive. But it doesn't stop only with the people. We have Israel and its God. Shema Israel, O hear, O Israel, the Lord God is one, says Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 1. These words express the underlying faith of Israel, its people, and all of those who unite themselves to her. These exist as one indivisible God by whose will the universe and all that is created. It was this radical departure of polytheism. Polytheism is the idea of having many gods, as you will see in my classes in Spanish regarding Santeria, which has to do with the ideas of other gods and divinities. Abraham the Hebrew was the first to give effective expression to this monotheistic faith. Obviously, other daughters also took out that same message, as we have in Islam and as well as Christianity, but made changes along its way. Becoming the founding patriarch of the Hebrews, as it is part of become known in the latter generation, the Israelites or the Jews. Abraham, the first human being to become aware of this spiritual truth. Even the Torah mentions Hanok and Noah, who preceded Abraham, were righteous men who walked with God. They too believed in the existence of one supreme being and worshipped him and lived according to the faith. And there was many others, but Maimonides believed that one time early men did not even know the one true God. but the knowledge of the faith was lost to them. And I mentioned this in the study that I gave on Hilchot Kochavim in Spanish. So please take a look at that video. If you know Spanish, even better. And he said very clearly that researchers have discovered that basically this all was lost in the idea of one God and how it was introduced, this issue of idolatry. Well, my friends, we're going to stop here at exactly an hour, and we're going to continue in the next class on Israel and its God, Israel and its Torah. Stay tuned and continue to watch these videos if you want to learn how to be a Jew. Shalom, shalom.